Hey everyone, welcome to Plants and Politics. So, do I have a story for you today? This story is about a seemingly fake airline magnate who convinced Republicans that satellites were used to steal the election from Donald Trump. And this person appears to be a grifter. So, stay tuned. This is a very interesting story. You're going to want to hear the end. It's kind of long, but trust me, it is so worth it. So, yes, it's time for another episode of Get the Fuck Out.
Get the fuck out of here. No, I cannot. It's serious.
So, here's the deal, guys. As you may know, as you may have heard, Italygate is a thing. Italygate is what everyone's calling this conspiracy theory that took hold in Q-Loon world. And a large chunk of the population believes this. They are convinced that an Italian defense contractor conspired with the CIA and used military satellites to rig the election for Biden. And no, I'm not kidding. If you haven't heard this story, it's pretty unbelievable all on its own. But as I said, I'm going to get to the really good stuff at the end of where this originated. So you really want to hear this. But anyway, Trump world took this so seriously, this insanity, that his final chief of staff, Mark Meadows, actually emailed the Justice Department in December of last year and asked them to look into it. That's how serious they took it. He sent the acting attorney general a copy of a letter outlining this lunacy. And this information was written on paper with the letterhead of a Virginia-based company called U.S. Aerospace. Okay, U.S. Aerospace Partners, actually. Then, so that was in December. Then in January of this year, prior to January 6th, prior to the domestic terrorist attack, another Virginia-based company called the Institute for Good Governance released a statement. And it was supposedly written, this statement, by an Italian attorney. In this so-called Italian attorney letter, it said that a hacker admitted to being involved in this Italian satellite vote switching scheme. Now, most people are denying this. The attorney says, nope, not involved. The person, the hacker who they say was involved says no. His attorney said he has no involvement, doesn't know what you're talking about. This is totally, he called it fake news. Everybody is denying any part in this or any knowledge of this. Well, now we may know where this particular insane in the membrane conspiracy theory began, because U.S. Aerospace Partners and the Institute for Good Governance are both run by the same woman. It's a woman named Michelle Roosevelt Edwards. So, who is this Edwards woman? Well, for starters, she was a Republican candidate. Surprise, surprise. She ran for Congress in 1986. She failed in her bid for that seat, but then she began sewing christening gowns. And she was selling them to stores like Macy's, and she was selling them in other countries. Edwards then went to work as an executive assistant for an orthodontist's office after her marriage ended back in the 1990s. Now, several years after that, she remarried and she became an investment banker, and she dabbled in horse breeding, and she hung out with the likes of polo charities. Okay. So kind of a socialite, not necessarily somebody who is high powered or you would think of having, major political connections or whatever, other than her run for Congress, which failed. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, this woman becomes like this folk hero to the Somalian people. Somali pirates began calling her Amira, which means princess in Arabic. I told you this was going to get weird, okay? So this woman who's literally like sewing christening gowns is all of a sudden a princess to Somali pirates. She positioned and portrayed herself as someone with political connections who could help the Somalian people at a time when pirate ships were taking over their oceans and warring factions had left their people just desperate. They needed aid, they needed relief. And Edwards effectively charmed high-level officials in both the US and the Somalian governments. Somehow, don't know. She also convinced numerous people that she had and was working on a plan to secure and stabilize Somalia. So as she tells it, someone came to her and said, hey, can you help out the Somalian people? This is what's going on. She fell in love with the idea. She really wanted to help them. And so she stepped up. So she starts bringing in people to do this so-called work and mission to help the Somalian people. She's bringing in people like Marine colonels, special forces members, people of that caliber, right? Not stupid people, not people who don't know what's going on. Some of these people left high-paying jobs to work with her, okay? They left high-powered, high-paying jobs. The Pentagon even granted her a classified contract, and they sent her to Somalia in 2008 to gather intelligence. Then in 2010, Edwards gathered a team of special forces and filmmakers. And she said, hey, I've got a plan. There was this British couple who had been kidnapped by Somali pirates. So she tells these people, this group that she gathers, I've got a plan to free them. This is going to be amazing. We're going to bring these people back home, blah, blah, blah. Prior to taking off for this trip, Edwards writes an email to one of the people involved in this so-called rescue. And she says that this rescue is going to be written about as, quote, the daring rescue by a white girl and her knuckle dragger associates. This story will put us on the map in East Africa. So she's trying to say, like, her group, her team of people who wants to help the Somalian people, who wants to bring about calm and help Somalia, this rescue is going to do it. This is going to make them larger than life and prove to everyone that they're the real deal. Well, the rescue never happened. In fact, Edwards and her entire team were kicked out of the country. They were escorted out after she was accused of inciting violence because she was encouraging rebels to take up arms and fight. She got them all whipped into a frenzy, according to people who were in the room, part of her team that went there. And from the way they tell it, basically she had no plan. They showed up and they sat in like a safe house and did nothing. And then they all got irritated and they took off for the airport, and they were stopped on their way to the airport and brought back to the safe house where they were all questioned and held for a while because of her inciting this violence. Oh, and that 2008 Pentagon contract where they flew her over and wanted her to gather intelligence, yeah, that was terminated at the end of 2008 for non-performance. And non-performance kind of seems to be the theme with this lady. It's kind of her middle name, because she wasted the time and money of basically everyone she encountered throughout the years. Everybody that she brought in to work on these projects with her, and everyone who got involved in her so-called plan to stabilize Somalia, they all tell the same story. They all gave her money along the way, by the way. It seems she always needed startup money for this or for that or whatever. Money they say they never recouped. A lot of these people say, you know, I figured, hey, there's some startup costs or we need this or that to get it going, as she's telling me. And so I'll put in some money, and then eventually when we bring in other people, big names and people who can fund this whole project, will get paid back. That never happened. They also say that none of her plans ever materialized. So one by one, these people became disillusioned with Edwards and they moved on. So people would get involved and they'd be around for 6-7 months at a time. And then they'd realize nothing's happening. Like all she's doing is talking and nothing's happening. One retired naval intelligence officer who also worked with Edwards said, quote, "The problem with Michelle is separating fact from fiction. What is real and what is made up?" But that's just the tip of the iceberg with this woman, because she also apparently called a press conference in 2019. So this is years later after this whole Somali thing went down. She calls this press conference in Iceland, and she announces that she's purchased the failed Icelandic airline called WOW Air. Edwards said that she purchased all of their assets and flights were going to resume shortly. She said it's going to happen next month, actually. She made this announcement. She called this press conference in September of 2019, and she said that the flights would start in October of 2019. So keep that in mind, okay? She said in her press conference that there were multiple investors and that they had all pledged or put up $85 million, that they had $85 million on hand to get this airline back up and running. To date, WOW Air has resumed not one single flight. They're not up and running. Now, she blames COVID, but everyone who worked with her on WOW Air, since she had made this announcement, like people that she brought on and hired, they've quit. They told journalists they don't understand what the hell she's trying to do. It makes no sense financially, logistically, and they say that nothing she ever says comes to pass, just like with the Somali stuff. Then, the day after the 2020 election here in the US, Edwards' future kind of took a turn for the worse, because a news crew from Iceland wanted to find out who this woman is, why nothing has happened, because she kept calling these press conferences or making all these promises after the major press conference. And she kept saying, oh, well, this is going to happen. It's coming. It's coming. It's going to happen. Kind of like this Mike Lindell thing, right? Like he keeps promising this evidence that never seems to appear. So this news outlet says that they reached out. They spoke with the authorities in various airports, various hubs around the United States where Edwards claims WOW Air is going to be flying to. Because this was at the beginning of this year, this news outlet reached out. And she kept saying in this interview that I'm going to talk about in a minute, that in the first quarter of 2021, they were going to start with these flights and they were going to go to major hubs. Like they were going to go to Dallas. They were going to go to all these major airports in Florida. Well, when they reached out, when this news outlet reached out to all of these airports and spoke with the authorities, they said, yeah, first we've heard of it, have not heard a word about any of this. In fact, I Googled WOW Air just today, and I found out that just today, they filed the paperwork to apply for their operating license. They didn't even have an operating license when she said back in September of 2019 that flights were going to start in October of 2019. So we're almost 2 years later, and they didn't even have an operating license. Seems like you'd kind of need to do that first before flights took off. I don't know. I mean, I don't work in the airline business, but kind of seems fundamental. So the reporter also spoke with people who were hired to work with or for WOW Air, and they say they were never paid. What do you know? One was a company hired by WOW to create a ticketing system. So they took Edwards to court. They took her and her company to court, and they won for failure to pay because the court ruled that they delivered the system as promised. Now, when you ask Edwards about it, she says, oh, it didn't turn out the way we thought it was going to. They didn't give us what they promised. The court looked at everything and said, no, looks like you got what you were promised. Pay up. So stupidly, Edwards agreed to an interview with this Icelandic news station. So the Icelandic crew travels from Iceland to the headquarters where her company, the Institute for Good Governance, is located. The company headquarters is listed as a 38,000 square foot, 22 bedroom, 1,500 acre estate in Virginia. She leads the crew around. She explains to them, what all the rooms are. And she tells them that the property has 3 kitchens, that she retains a full-time chef because she has these 3 kitchens that are always operable, right? She shows them her bedroom, shows them her private spaces. She's making a big deal out of it. How, we never let people this close, but we're going to show you all of these sanctum sanctorums, as she described it. However, the reporter noted that all of the kitchens seemed pretty empty, said there wasn't much action, not much going on. Then, get this, Edwards literally, while they're having this meeting, while she's being interviewed, she has a man come out in a chef's uniform, and he serves them coffee out of a box and donuts from Dunkin' Donuts. So on the side of the box of coffee, it says Dunkin' Donuts, and he gives them donuts out of a box. That's what they got to eat with her 3 kitchens and a full-time chef. Okay, if you're on YouTube, I'm putting a picture up right now so you can see a screenshot so you know I'm not full of shit, because I know this sounds insane, but this is what actually took place. Okay, hold on, because it gets better. Here's the best part. This 22 bedroom, 1,500 acre estate where they met, where she gives this interview, is not her home. This wasn't her property. Toward the end of the interview, the reporter hits her with it. He asks her why the property is listed for sale. He says, I went online trying to find the property, and this house is listed. This property is listed. And she says, oh, well, I recently purchased this property. This is a new acquisition for us. He then questions why there's no family photos, why there are no personal effects around. He mentions, oh, your late husband, I know you really love him, and you have a son, and I noticed you don't have any photos of them around. So she totally blows it off, never actually answers the question, just says, oh yeah, I don't have them in my bedroom. Oh, and I didn't show you every nook and cranny of the estate. Then he literally asks her if this is her home. He literally says, is this your home? And she replies affirmatively. Take a look at this video, or a listen.
So this is where you live, this is your home.
Yes.
And this is your property.
Yes.
So did you guys see how sincere she looked? She looked totally sincere in that video. She didn't blink. She didn't fidget. She looked completely honest, right? I would believe her. If she looked at me in that way and she said what she said, I would believe her. Well, she was lying. Title records for that property reveal that the property is owned, that estate is owned by a company. And the company was owned by a deceased financier named David B. Ford, who has nothing to do with Edwards. In fact, Ford's widow told the Washington Post she doesn't know Edwards. She has no idea who this woman is. And then they showed her the video. They showed her the footage of the Icelandic interview. And Ford's widow said, quote, "She's in my house, How is she in my house? Turns out how she got in the house is Edwards is a licensed real estate agent in the state of Virginia. She's not the listing agent for that property. She's not the broker or the agent of record for that listing, but that's likely how she gained access. She probably contacted the listing agent and said, hey, I want to show your property to a client, or I want to preview it for a client. It happens all the time. And remember, she's using that address, the address of this estate that she doesn't own, as the address for the headquarters for her Institute for Good Governance. And as for this so-called $85 million that she had from investors for Wow Air, that's another lie, it seems, because the reporter asks her in this interview how much she's invested into the company. She must have forgotten how much she actually said was invested, and she said 7.5 million. Not quite 85 million. And then he asked her who the other investors are, or if there are other investors, and she said, no, there are no other investors. This is the problem when you lie. You forget what you said. When you tell the truth, you don't need to remember anything. The truth is always the truth. Now, could investors have fallen off? Could people have said, hey, I don't want to take this risk with COVID? It's possible. But given the fact that this woman is literally lying about where she lives and trying to portray herself as some uber rich, like swimming in money type of person, and she's literally squatting in the property, she's literally in someone else's home doing an interview, yeah, I tend to believe that 85 million in those investors never actually existed. Now, what I find hysterical is that also during this interview, she's going on and on about her faith in God and her religion. She says that all of her ventures are faith-based. So this faith-based grifter is now under investigation by Italian authorities in regard to this whole Italygate thing, in regard to this whole fantasy that she may have purposely and personally cooked up and initiated and then spread around. But this is how desperate Republicans are. These are the types of people they're willing to get in bed with. Think about this. Think about the cast of characters they've surrounded themselves with just to try to steal the election. I mean, I told you guys recently about that other woman who claimed to be a Purple Heart recipient. Was a total lie. She claimed that she was some sort of intelligence agent, and it turns out, oh, she spent 1 year in the Army like over a decade ago or 2 decades ago, and she had no intelligence training or very little. And this is the most ironic part of all of this. They fail to realize that they are the ones trying to steal an election. They're willing to align themselves with literal con artists to do it. No one does their homework. No one does a minute of research to find out who these nut jobs are. They just take them at their word, and then they whine and complain about how the rest of the country won't listen to them or take their concerns seriously. God, I just can't imagine why. It's a mystery. Why won't people listen to you when you're literally spreading fake stories, conspiracy theories, cooked up by literal con artists? And now, I have no evidence of this. I have nothing that I read, but here's my take. Here's what I think is going on with this Edwards woman. I would not be surprised if we find out that this is like one big Ponzi scheme. Like she was taking money that she took in from other so-called projects from people and then using it to pay other people to hang out with her, pretending that she's paying them, that these are their salaries. This is what you guys have to help you until we get the really big investors and the really, big fish involved in all of this. And I'm sorry, I'm no psychologist, but I just think that she's someone who wanted to feel important. She wants to feel like she's doing something, and she wants to have people pay attention to her. I don't know. Why else would you make up such crazy stuff? Why else would you go squat in another person's estate, a $30 million estate, and pretend that it's yours? Like I said, I'm not a psychiatrist, but oh my, oh wow. Wow, air is right. Oh boy. This is the crew. This is Donald Trump's dream team right here. The dream team is in the house. No, and it should be the dream team is in someone else's house. Oh my God. You seriously, you can't make this shit up, guys. Oh my God. Do you see why now this had to be an episode of Get the Fuck Out? Because this is so, like, the whole story is like, get the fuck out. Oh boy, but there's other players in this, so I'll save those for another day. I'll let you guys know when I hear more. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if we find out this is a massive Ponzi scheme, and I also wouldn't be surprised if this woman ends up in cuffs someday. So, yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. Take care, and I will talk with you soon.